So switching gears a little bit, Freakonomics, you just debuted at Tribeca.
We did, yeah.
What attracted you to the project?
I mean, it was one of those books that when it came out, like I just loved the book from the beginning. I thought it was just so smart and so different, and really represented a lot of the stuff that I really enjoy, which is looking at problems or issues from a very different perspective or from a different point of view. And I think what Levitt and Dubner did in that book was just, I mean, it was revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they connected the dots to problems, or they outlined, where they see, the way you would fix, some type of problem in our society. And so when I remember I met Chad Troutwine, he was one of the producers on a film called Paris Je t'aime,
mm-hmm.
which came out a few years ago.
Yep.
And, that's this movie. It's an ensemble film, where, 15 directors did pieces about why they love Paris. Mm-hmm. And so when he optioned the book, he said this would be a great way to tackle Freakonomics, which I thought was absolutely, he was spot on.
Right.
Because everything is kind of so eclectic and very different within the book. And he came to me first before he went to any of the directors. He goes, "Would you be down to doing this?" And I was like, "Sign me up." And when he started listing off the people that he wanted to go to, I was like, just to even be in the same room with all those directors who I have so much respect for would just be awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it different? Do you approach it differently, knowing that it's an ensemble film as a documentary filmmaker?
Well, I approached it different, because I'm not in this piece. Like, usually most of the films that I do, it's like me at front and center, trying, experiencing something mm-hmm. and kind of relaying what I'm going through to you as you watch it. This was done, because since we were going from an already completed text and from an already kind of completed study, it's me narrating it, but we're basically just adapting this information to a film.
Right.
And so, we went about it in a very different way of like, now just how do we convey this information in a fun, exciting, engaging way? And I did the very last chapter of the book, which is a Rashonda by any other name. Mm-hmm. It's a chapter all about does what you name your kids matter, and it deals with race, it deals with economic stature or economic status, and all the things that I think really affect people and how you name your kids, and also your outcome in life. So I think that the topic was rich for doing something fun, rich for humor, and I think what we completed was really cool. And I think the way that there was so much animation in the film, which we were the very first people done, and I think that kind of the style that we came with, a lot of that style translated to multiple pieces in the film, and so there really is this kind of great through line mm-hmm. of animation in the movie that I think is great.
Right. And how was it received at Tribeca?
Well, nobody told me they hated it. So.
Well, hey, that's a good sign.
That's a good sign. No, the reviews that I've seen and the people that I spoke to, people dig it. It makes a lot of really dense information palatable, which mm-hmm. it's a hard thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you touched on something I wanted to ask you about how you tend to narrate your own films and
right.
star in a lot of them. And I was curious, what was behind the decision to narrate all your own films? Is it simply because it's a personal experience for you?
Sure. Starting with Super Size Me, the original idea of Super Size Me was I wasn't going to be in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like, I was going to make this film and have somebody else be the guinea pig in this film.
Right.
And literally it came down to the realization that if I have somebody else do this, when they go home at night, I'm not going to know if they're like sneaking broccoli or having a salad when I'm not around. Right. It's like there's a real. So it literally came out of the fact that I don't know if I can trust somebody else to do that.
Right.
So that's where it kind of started from. And then for me, after Super Size Me, when we sold 30 Days, the idea for 30 Days was originally I was going to do every episode. Mm-hmm. Where when I said to Alex, like, well, you're not going to have a girlfriend very long if you do that. So that kind of got thrown out the window. Right. And which I thought also was great because what I loved about 30 Days were the episodes that I wasn't in.
Right.
Like, I think that's a much better proof of concept. I think it's a much better way to look at problems by having, regular people going out and, kind of confronting their own belief systems. And mm-hmm. It's a cooler way to look at the issues.
Now, when you're in the recording booth, do you have it all scripted out ahead of time? Do you ad-lib some? What's your process like?
No, like we'll script it out, and then there's definitely a lot of ad-libbing as we go in and change things on the fly. There's tighter timelines that you're working with in TV, so there's definitely things you have to hit and ins and out points, for what you're delivering to a network. Like literally you're delivering a show that is 42 minutes and 15 seconds.
Right.
So you have to hit real hard ins and outs on VO. But yeah, we would go in and have just a ball with it. We would script out tons of ideas and then just literally run with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. So speaking of going back to Super Size Me, do you still get recognized from that on the street?
I'm usually when I'm in a restaurant eating. Yeah.
That makes sense. Do people try and like sneak you?
Well, yeah, they walk by and they're just like they look at what's on my plate and they're like just making sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I hear that next, and I apologize if this is incorrect, but I hear that you're working on a Comic-Con documentary.
We are.
That's exciting.
That is exciting. I went to Comic-Con last year and basically fell in love with the place. Mm-hmm. And I was there doing the Simpsons 20th anniversary special.
Right.
And when I was there, I met Stan Lee, who Stan Lee said, I met him and I was like, Stan, it's an honor to meet you. As a kid who grew up in West Virginia, reading, your comics just, made it cool for a kid like me to want to tell stories, to want to, go into the entertainment business. Like, oh my God, Morgan, I love what you do. I love your movies. Like, we should make a movie together. We should make a documentary. We should make a documentary about Comic-Con. And I was like, that's a great idea, Stan. And then I walked so I shook his hand, walked 10 feet away to my agent who was there from CAA. And I said, Stan Lee and I want to make a documentary about Comic-Con. And he goes, that's a great idea. You should meet my other client who's coming in tomorrow. So literally the next morning, I was sitting down for breakfast with Joss Whedon, who was his other client.
Nice.
And so, so Joss says, listen, I'm in, whatever we want to do. So then I went and met with the folks at Comic-Con, and they said dozens of people have come to us trying to make a film about this, and we've always said no, but this is the one that actually might work. And literally weeks later, they said yes, which was amazing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, as a huge comic geek, I'm salivating at the very prospect of it. So.
And for me, it's going to be great to kind of do this film that's a celebration of all things kind of geek culture.
Sure. Are you recording at this year's Comic-Con?
We're going to shoot at this year's Comic-Con, yeah.
And do you have a tentative release date at all?
For me, I'd love to have the movie done by the end of the year, so next spring probably.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of The Simpsons, you lead nicely into all my next questions. How did that all come about? It was
an incredible thing. It literally came out of the blue. They were in their office, and it was Jim Brooks and Al Jean and Denise Surcott, who works for Jim, were talking about doing a 20th anniversary special of the show, and they said we should get a documentary filmmaker to do this. Why don't we do something different? And my name came up, and they started watching. So they said, well, we should watch some of his stuff. So they brought in, Super Size Me and Where in the World is Osama bin Laden. Mm-hmm. And so they started watching Where in the World is Osama bin Laden, and within, in the first 5 minutes is the video game fight sequence where I'm fighting Osama. Uh-huh. And Al Jean said, as soon as the video game sequence started where you were fighting Osama, we said, this is the guy that needs to make our special. And so I said, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. And it was like literally as soon as they watched that, and as soon as they hit stop, they called me on the phone and they said, we want you to do this. And, there's no way to say no to that. You're like, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, and speaking of Where is Osama bin Laden, that was another one of those movies where I think there was a couple of moments of, what exactly am I doing here?
Yeah.
Seemed like it got a little hairy from time to time.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, there were very scary moments, when you're in the middle of, you're embedded with the troops, and you're in the middle of like a Taliban ambush. You're like, this might not have been the best idea.
Right, especially with a pregnant girlfriend at home.
With a pregnant girlfriend back home, exactly.
So any plans to ever veer away from documentaries?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I really want to do is I would love to do a narrative feature, which, right now I'm attached to a couple of movies, that we're trying to raise the money for and cast right now. So, hopefully in the next year that'll happen, knock on wood.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And finally, you're a guy who's got a lot to say.
Yeah.
I think. So, what's the one thing you want the world to know about you that they might not already know?
I'm a great dancer.
That's good. I'll make sure to share that with everybody. Fantastic. Well, that's what I've got for you.
All right, cool.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I
appreciate it. It was my
it.
pleasure. Thank you. Take care.